Everybody, welcome back to Leosophy. We're finally at that juncture where I can talk about, I got my computer back, I can talk about the dark triad, psychopathy, sociopathy, and narcissism. And before anybody misunderstands, those three things are not technically the dark triad itself, but they play a role in the dark triad, to be sure. Narcissism is, in fact, one aspect. Let me start by talking about the dark triad. The dark triad are the three traits associated with really, really bad antisocial personalities. People who, if you see the worst of the worst people in prisons, for example, people who are arguably irredeemable, they tend to have these traits, and those would be narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism. And I'll elaborate more as I talk about psychopaths and sociopaths and narcissists. First of all, a psychopath, the biggest issue with them is that they do not have a conscience, or at the very least, they do not have empathy. So they don't really relate to other people. In short, like, a regular person, for example, if they inconvenience somebody, just inconvenience them, they might feel a twinge of guilt, not letting somebody out of a parking space. And if they cause tremendous life-threatening damage to somebody, they feel tremendous guilt. Additionally, a normal person can sort of rationalize what another human being's experiences are. They can sort of put themselves in their shoes. Psychopaths don't. They literally can't. They do not empathize with others at all. So the biggest challenge in dealing with that particular aspect of human personality is if you don't empathize and you don't have a conscience, there's really no incentive to not do bad things except for punishment. So if you can get around that part, you see how that's a problem, and this is why so many people in prisons have that particular personality trait, because what stops most people from doing wrong is the knowledge that it's wrong, the feelings of guilt and empathy that correspond with not wronging others. So that's the biggest issue with psychopathy. Sociopathy, on the other hand, a conscience is present, and empathy is even possible. The problem is that it's much, much, much more reduced than in a normal person. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges is understanding that psychopathy and sociopathy is a little bit more of a spectrum, and it's very easy to misdiagnose just somebody with selfish traits, or even perceivably selfish traits, not even necessarily actually selfish, as being a sociopath or a psychopath, and that's simply not the case. It's again, like many other things, it's more of a spectrum, and when you're dealing with psychology, most behaviors fall into sort of a spectrum. And now let's talk about narcissism, and this goes hand in hand with the dark triad too. So psychopathy and narcissism are two of the three facets of the dark triad. So a narcissist is a person who has a self-inflated view. That is to say, they think they're more important than others. They're better than most people. They're the kind of person who can walk into a funeral and see people crying over the deceased and are very concerned, not about those people being sad, but wait a minute, everybody's here, but this isn't about me. And so people with those sorts of personality traits, they may be inclined to turn it into about them. So, you guys, they'll start crying, they'll start fainting, they'll start making it all about them, which, by the way, totally normal aspects of grief, but in this instance, their motivation is not actually grief. They're not feeling the things that they're showcasing. It's actually about garnering attention. I think and this is something you won't read in a textbook, I think there's a huge connection between narcissism and Munchausen by proxy, because they're basically getting attention for things that are happening to their child or someone in their care, and it's about them. It's not really about the child at all. In fact, they're usually harming the child in order to garner attention. I've never seen any literature suggesting that. I'm sure it's out there, but I just wanted to put that out there, that's my thought on the matter. The reason why this works so well with psychopathy as a dark triad component is if you don't care about others and you can't empathize with others, and you think you're more important than others, you need to be the center of attention, or other people's resources really should be yours because you're more important and you're special and you're unique, well, that gives you infinitely more reason to harm others because they're not important. So for a psychopath, people's feelings and pain don't matter, and for a narcissist, even if they did matter, they're not as important as theirs. It reminds me, for me, like the perfect example, even though it's played for laughs and it's a funny little line, but it's one of my favorite lines in a cartoon is Daffy Duck. He's about to be sort of inflicted with pain by somebody as comeuppance, and he says, "Stop! I'm not like most people. Pain hurts me." And it conveys both a psychopath and a narcissist's view of others so succinctly and so well. It's interesting how the Dark Triad's exhibited in old cartoons with ducks for whatever reason, because Daffy exhibited that, and then also Donald Duck, the theme song for him. It was, something like, "Who's never wrong but always right? Who'd never dream of starting a fight? Who's got nothing but bad luck? No one but Donald Duck." And it's an ironic song. That what they're showcasing is that he's actually the author of his problems, but he doesn't take responsibility for them. And so it's interesting that in both cases, the two big cartoon companies with their ducks, Donald and Daffy, they illustrate that better than a lot of fiction that I've seen garnered more towards adults, really. And lastly, let's come to the Dark Triad's final piece, which is Machiavellianism, which I think is very unfortunately named, because Machiavelli was not Machiavellian at all. The Prince was actually written to satirize the behavior of government heads. But anyway, let's put that under the table for now. But Machiavellianism is sort of the view that the ends justify the means. It's the view that sacrifices, no matter what, are worth it if the end goal is what you're in pursuit of, and you get it. The reason why this is, in my opinion, the scariest part of the Dark Triad, because when you have someone who's a psychopath, they're very likely to end up in prison, they're very likely to murder people, etc. If someone's a narcissist, they're very likely to be abusive towards their family and other relationships. The Lifetime movie stereotype. A lot of people think it would be the psychopath, but it's really the narcissist who's the John Stamos in the Lifetime movie kind of character. And those are bad on their own. When you compound those two, when you have a psychopathic narcissist, well, now they're much more likely to commit violent crimes. Well, when you add Machiavellianism to the mix, now you've got someone with grander designs than just, being on the school board. So now you have institutions being run by a very bad person. You have institutions, and I realize it's subjective to say that somebody's bad for having these traits, but let's be honest here. Now you have a despot in the making. Now, it just depends on what they're capable of. If they might just be the worst manager at Walmart. They might be the principal that runs the school into the ground. They might be the nun that starts selling children, like what happened in Ireland. They might cover up tons and tons of abuses. They might be the crooked sheriff that runs the town into just utter darkness. But they could also be, Mussolini. So it's really more a question of the opportunities afforded to them and the environment in which they're in, whether it's fertile ground for a tyrant or not. But Machiavellianism really cranks all of it up to 11 because it becomes more a question of the ends justifying the means. And the reason why I bring this up is because also all three personality types, whether they have 1, 2, or 3 of these, of the Dark Triad, they tend to survive by being charming. You've probably met these people. You've probably met people who abused their children and thought they were the best parent ever. You've probably met someone who was a corrupt official and you thought they had the most integrity of anyone, because they tend to be very charming, very sociable, and they've mastered being good at this. Now, I'm going to rewind it just a little bit, though, to emphasize a very important point, because I realize this is all very dramatic. Lots of people have these traits, and they don't do anything like that. They, especially just psychopaths. See, that's the scariest of the three on paper. Like, people hear psychopath and like, oh, like a bank robber. No, there are psychopaths who don't ever hurt anybody because they just don't have any ambitions beyond that. They don't empathize, but they don't harm others. Narcissists are substantially more dangerous. Machiavellians are really dangerous, and it's when you have all three of these traits that you really have something that could literally undermine nations and start wars. And I know that sounds like hyperbole, but I mean it. Yeah. Next time we'll talk about something a little nicer. We'll talk about OCD and uh, oh my gosh, what can't I think of it? Tourette's, and maybe autism. We'll see. Yeah, like, share, subscribe, keep asking questions. Bye.